Hollywood has a massive problem. While there was once a time passion existed more, having imagination there, because, when especially when you think about like Disney, for example, because Disney was once a good company, I believe, back when it first, began as a company and before it became the evil corporation that we see it as now. Once had things, that were actually good. During the modern era now, though, they've now became one of the most evil. Hollywood has become one of the most evilest and corporate places on earth. If you understand what I'm saying. Now, comedy movies, in my eyes, are typically literally the most bargain bin and bottom of the barrel things that are produced in the United States. They're the easiest thing to aim directly at an audience because they're the lowest common denominator, type thing to make. In my perspective, I see comedies films as the most generic and most cash cow function genre of entertainment in our country. Now, I honestly must mention that comedy movies aren't inherently bad, and I think that comedy films can actually be good if they're actually subtle and good handling humor and comedy. Even can making a well written, compelling story too if it's all written and managed well in the entire work. Um, Personally, I actually believe that comedy movies could actually be great if they're actually, if there's actually a real punchline and real gag actually making the movie funny and actually has some real like thought and depth into it. I don't think any movie is bad simply for just being a comedy movie. I mean, of course not. I mean, that would be stupid. I just think that, they're that comedy movies are just the most saturated genre of entertainment. I just feel like they're, the way, because of the way how they're made, they're the bottom of the barrel of entertainment. I just feel like they're the easiest thing that's just made to be a cash cow. That's stupid. But I do think that generally, due to how formulaic, especially how most modern movies are and have been, they made themselves the easiest throwaway entertainment being produced because, in honesty, most comedy movies are bad. I do feel like because most comedy movies just follow the same tropes, and that's really what it comes down to. That's how most comedy movies, in my opinion, are actually bad and are actually dog shit. It's because of the fact that you don't have, very talented directors that are willing to innovate and create anything remarkable. And something that's actually worth your time as entertainment. Because they're poorly written and they're just cheesy and just a way to turn your brain off instead of being actually enjoyable to watch. They mostly suffer from having the same tropes as each other and have essentially the same plot structure and style as each other. If you honestly pay attention enough when you watch enough media and see everything, you notice something strange that comedy films are typically the most milk genre of entertainment that you can ever possibly look at. And this really applies the most to Hollywood because Hollywood is very corrupt and they're, not a place of passion. They're just an evil place on earth, really, for the most part now, that just milks everything. And I feel like comedy movies are their lowest common denominator of entertainment. Most modern kids animated films, for example, kind of relating to this subject, are all comedy movies because they are easy to make money because it's aimed for families watching them as an easy thing to just throw on and eat popcorn and watch together. And even though some of these movies are poorly written, it typically gets unthought of because the way the film is aimed is just for people who don't watch things taking them seriously. So of course it's guaranteed to make money. Basically what I'm saying too. Because it's aimed for the lowest common denominator, they're not going to really care that much that they're really watching something that's just crap, really. So it's just easy for the people making these movies to make money. This also relates to more adult films as they also follow the same trend, being comedy movies, as just disposable entertainment that gets completely wiped from your mind after seeing it, because these movies are milked as easy ways to make huge profits, because the people who buy these movies aren't there to be able turning on their mind when watching things, because these movies are aimed for low common denominators. And I know that I already said that, repeatedly a few times, but, really, in all honesty, that's really the core problem with this movie in particular, and really how this movie is only interesting in the sense that it just leads to an even bigger problem that it just is every single thing wrong with Hollywood, really, if you think about it, into one movie. And I'm going to be talking about why I feel that way. Because this is actually one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It really is a horrendous movie. Red Notice is a very bad film. They all have people who typically act like dumbasses. Sometimes there's a joke shooting in about them just being beaten up by an animal sometimes because it's just funny. They usually sexualize characters and act like that's a real relationship. They get drunk a lot sometimes. Sometimes they try shaking their asses sometimes on the screen just to act like goofballs and idiots. There's typically alcohol gags. And the plot is rarely ever serious enough to follow what the film is actually about. You're never able to actually take seriously what's going on because the movie's plot is usually, most comedy movies have plots that are normally very thin to follow. And really, in all honesty, have very little creative and subtle thought being put into them to actually make. And yet, some of these movies, like Red Notice, for example, somehow are very high budgeted and have a shit ton of money just thrown into them, so that way they could just waste money, playing with their dick and just throwing it out, and just wasting our time with nonsense instead of actually giving us a real thing to watch. In my mind, and having recent memory, there is no film that honestly matches having all these issues quite like Red Notice does. The reason why I bring all that up is because when you think about it, Red Notice is literally everything wrong with Hollywood placed into a single movie. And you might be thinking how all that really, really corresponds and has anything to do with this movie. Well, that's because this movie is literally so bottom of the barrel and so passionless and soulless that it's really just, like every single thing that I've described in every single generic bottom of the barrel comedy movie, and this movie does literally nothing different from any of them. This movie has a really big budget of $200 million. This movie has an atrocious, convoluted story. It's literally the most generic comedy imaginable. The film is shallow and irritating to its very core. The characters are literally cardboard and thin to the point of everything feeling like a plot device. And altogether is offensive with how much it literally does nothing as a film, but literally just exist. And it's just there to completely just make money. I mean, this movie has, no talent. It has no good direction. And it also, as you can also tell, just uses big actors to just, you market them as a selling point for this movie. So that way the lowest common denominator on Netflix can just pick this dog shit up and just watch it and just, forget it exists a day later after they finish watching it. But they wasted their money giving money to these hacks who produce this pig slop, and will continue feeding us this garbage until they actually learn their lesson, which I'm going to really be honest with you, they're not going to learn their lesson, because people are not going to change in how they spend money. And that's the unfortunate part of the world, part of how the real world works. Unfortunately, because these things are easily marketable, because movies like Red Notice are easily marketable to American audiences, they're not going to learn their lesson, and they're going to continue making the same garbage over and over again. And the reason why I'm making this video today is because I want to expose and just talk about how these movies are just formulaic, and how an abomination like Red Notice was made into the world. And I just also want to talk about it because I just want to make some interesting points, and I just feel like it just helps my career as a critic, and I want to be able to I feel very passionate to just talk about all sorts of different things to explain just how I feel about them. I think that's really fun and cool. I almost honestly wasn't even sure if I would even need to make a review on it. Really only because of the fact that when you look at a terrible movie like this, Red Notice is a very easy target and very easy to break down why it's bad. But the reason why I decided to review this movie in particular was because of one night where I was watching this film with my family, and I was honestly shocked, and my stomach was actually literally pulsed when I saw how truly shitty and awful this movie was, and how little it actually cared about how it was made, and just wanted to exist so much only as an easy cash grab aimed for people who aren't in their minds strong enough to take anything they watch seriously and see subtlety in what they watch. And I mean no offense saying that. I'm not saying that all people who are watching this movie are dumb. That's not my point. The point is, it's just that, that's just what this movie is being aimed directly towards. It's aimed towards, a more shallow audience. I don't, criticize people for, how they feel about anything. But I do believe in criticizing, of course, the product itself, though. And that's just what I'm doing, with every review that I make. Personally, this is a really, really bad movie. And there's actually nothing redeeming about this entire film. This movie is such an utter piece of shit, and actually has nothing redeeming about it, and has the audacity to just be a disposable wipe-my-ass piece of toilet paper and just flush it down the drain thing so much that it embodies the entire problem with Hollywood as a single movie to make money. And also, I also want to mention this too, and I'll be calling this a movie again, this. Personally, I don't think that this movie should have honestly been called Red Notice. It should have just been called Brown Notice, because really the only place that this movie belongs is literally in your bathroom, and, literally being flushed down after you wipe your ass. This movie's a horrendous, disgusting, horrible smelling piece of shit, and should have just been wasted before even ever being released. There was no reason to make this movie other than the fact that these hacks who made this garbage just wanted to make money. So what is this movie technically about? Well, this is the plot essentially. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, And yes, I won't honestly call them by the character names in this movie, because the time you finish watching it, you won't remember them anyway, since the characters are so lifeless. And yeah, that's, I mean, it is true. I'm honestly not even going to even call them by the characters' names, because there's really no point. And this movie's not even really not even really, you know, not shallow enough to even make its own cast of characters memorable by even a single stretch of the imagination. So the plot really is just about, tracking a criminal responsible for stealing an egg of Cleopatra, and ends up teaming up with him, who's Ryan Reynolds, and the cop is actually tricked by Gal Gadot and sent to jail intentionally. So there's no way to stop her, and that's how Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds team up. This movie was very easy to tear down with how easy to notice how shallow it really is. With a premise that already sounds like literally almost other comedy movies put together, and with not a single second of original thought put into it, Red Notice does a very weak job of buying its viewers into it by just sounding like a silly and overly Hollywood-esque ripoff of James Bond or any other spy film as well. Because really, in all honesty, there's honestly way better movies that you could honestly watch than wasting your time with a garbage movie like this. This movie has literally no original or creative premise on any stretch of the imagination. It almost kind of feels like Johnny English, except really, in all honesty, I mean, Johnny English is actually a way better movie than this. It's not perfect in my opinion, but it's definitely at least way funnier and way more creative being a spoof than a comedy movie with spies. It's better written, in a lot of ways, at least a lot more so than this piece of trash. One thing you'll notice as you're watching this movie is how literally fast it moves between each set, as each setting is just given a marker, just exposition dumping words into your mouth, just to tell you each location the movie takes place in, and the world building is so weak and does so little to suck you into it that it just moves fast paced, and the movie just jumps its characters all over the place. And it's also really mainly because the pacing in this movie is garbage. It moves so quickly that you could barely even really follow it. Like, they're just like all over the place. One point they're in one location and they're just literally teleported to another location. And the movie does a little shit job, building itself from point A to point B. And it has so many gaps in between that you'd be like frustrated and calling the shit out all day long. One thing, one part of the film, they're in a museum. Another part, the two main idiot characters are in jail. Then they're hunting down the girl in some fancy dance party, and then in secret chamber combined together. Then a coliseum where there's just some stupid joke where a bull hits one of the guys. And the movie rips off Indiana Jones with Gal Gadot entering out of nowhere in some lost jungle. Then there's also a location where they're on a boat, where you also see the worst scene in this entire movie, and I think the movie like ends with them in an airport. That's like the final location that they're in, and like there's no consistency on any level with how this movie is actually structured and paced. You could literally find flaws in literally nearly every single scene in this movie. Because not only is the story convoluted and has no consistency with what it wants to actually tell as a story, but the movie is so poorly paced, it just jumps all over the place, and it has no consistency on any level. It almost kind of sounds like Attack on Titan if you really kind of think about it, with how little consistency that show also had with what story it actually wanted to tell. Oh, I will at least give Attack on Titan more credit than this movie with this, and just say that its first season is better. Although maybe I might rather watch this movie only in the rather than the final season of Attack on Titan. I think that's personally fair because I feel like Attack on Titan is 4 seasons long. I know that's getting a little off topic, but anyways, um, the movie can't stand still for more than 10 minutes trying to flesh out some area they're in, and the movie just jumps all over the place like it has no idea what it's doing because the direction is so horrendous. Speaking of how they write Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds, the way the movie just forces a bond between these two characters is beyond insufferable because every single scene they're in is just a mind-bogglingly stupid and tasteless scene that they're in where they act like idiots. And it's just like, how am I supposed to actually believe that they even become friends? It doesn't even really make any sense. Ryan Reynolds in this movie is a criminal, and Dwayne Johnson is a literal FBI agent literally hunting his ass down. So it doesn't even really make any sense how the movie would be just so poorly paced that the film would be like, just as like, you know what, let's just slap these two like cardboard characters together and let's just give them a bond because we need this to just progress the plot. The scene that sticks out to me the most where Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds were being dumb was having a fight where they act like idiots and they spill food on one another, and it just leads to this stupid fight in the cafeteria room where they're in jail, and that scene is what their is a representation of what their entire relationship is. Just forced nonsense, and it has no subtlety, and its direction is laughably poor. No chemistry, no real character, just some stupid hack moment that's just trying to get you to laugh, only because being an idiot in a Hollywood movie is apparently tasteful, good comedy that makes people lose themselves laughing. Am I right, guys? Because who cares about being smart on any level? We have to be monkeys and just watch this garbage, so that way we can just keep on feeding the pigs in Hollywood, so that way they can just continue being corporate douchebags. Because, they're happy that they have all of our wallets. Yeah. This movie doesn't do anything different or interesting at all from any other generic comedy movie. It's literally the bargain bin basement of Hollywood, and it's a tasteless, horrible movie with no soul or reason to exist. I also want to mention what a complete bitch Gal Gadot is portrayed in this movie, and how much her character in this movie makes me want to tear myself apart, and it all leads down to actually the worst part of the entire film. Because like I've already been saying, the pacing in this movie is garbage, and the movie has literally no consistency of what it's actually doing and what kind of story it's actually trying to tell. This is also a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I actually wasn't really a huge fan of the movie Wonder Woman. I mean, I have nothing personal against this actress at all, personally. I just don't think that she's really that great of an actress. I just feel like, I feel like I have to see Wonder Woman again to refresh my thoughts in the movie, but I didn't really like it that much. I didn't think it was awful. I know that's a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I feel like it's just, I don't know, it just didn't really click with me, and I just thought that there were just a few problems that I had. I didn't really like it. I didn't entirely hate it, but I just didn't love it, and I just think that it's a little overrated. I mean, no offense, of course. If you love Wonder Woman, that's okay, but for me, I don't know, it just wasn't really up there for me. But anyways, I already mentioned that she's responsible for this guy playing by Dwayne Johnson being in jail forwarding the plot. Well, she then also eventually kills her husband or boyfriend or whoever he is because he's forgettable. After successfully trapping our main characters before they're sent inside of a coliseum where she's stupid enough to actually believe where the final egg of Cleopatra is in another country, other than where they actually find the final relic. But, eventually she just appears out of nowhere again because it's just convenient that she's actually just smart enough now that she was never actually tricked to begin with, because the movie just jumps its characters from one setting to another with no, you know, logic going from point A to point B. This movie is so poorly written and so insufferable that it's on an unbelievable scale level. I actually was literally suffering watching this movie. That's what I think of this movie. This also adds together. Yeah, that's what I think of Brown Notice. This also adds together to the problem the movie has, where it literally jumps so much. There's literally zero consistency in where the characters are in the entire film, and the way each scenario is written is done in such a light way that the plot feels like it could just break at any point, because the pacing this movie has is so bad. So awful. After that nonsense, we get a hilariously bad chase scene where all the characters are just mangled all over, and it's literally the most boring and forgettable part of the entire movie. There honestly wasn't even much there to say about this part, other than it was just stupid. And honestly, I'd rather scratch the hairy balls of a hippo than ever touch any part of this movie ever again and ever watch it. Now, moving past that slog, we finally get to the most shallow twist ever in nearly any movie that I've ever seen, and what actually made the movie literally break itself by finally shitting all over and growing out of the TV. It turns out this whole movie, even though it was never foreshadowed at all or had any chemistry or any development or whatever, that Gal Gadot was actually Dwayne Johnson's girlfriend this whole time. Like, what? This movie. This moment honestly stunned me and actually made me yell how stupid this moment was while I was watching this piece of trash with my mom and my little sister. It was at this point in the film that the script had completely no direction. And while there was already nothing in this movie that was entertaining or funny on any level to begin with, now the movie just starts sucking your soul down and really pissing in your mouth how much it was really a complete mistake watching this horrible movie. The movie had already or the movie already had a plot premise that was basic enough that it's literally a copy of most spy films and comedy movies together, but then literally had no idea what it was doing at this point, because the plot literally just changes entirely what it was about, and with nothing articulating or working from point A to point B. The whole small premise of this movie is completely shot at this point, because it literally moved from catching a bitch who set up a cop to working with a criminal to now she was actually his lover and nothing was wrong this entire time with anything. I mean, literally has no plot structure on any level. Literally like just makes this shit up out of thin air and just, expects you to just go with it. This moment was so utterly disgusting that it was actually a literal transcending thought that made this movie from just being bad, in my opinion, to actually a complete and utter anomaly of a disaster. The madness doesn't even stop there. Soon after, we are randomly thrown in Ed Sheeran in the movie when all three eggs are presented during what I think was like some sort of like wedding gift to somebody. I'm thinking it was so confusing. I don't even think I even remember the exact reason behind that presentation of the eggs. I also want to say right now that I actually really dislike and actually hate Ed Sheeran as a music artist. I have nothing against the guy personally, but I just think his music is and songs are pretty bad and just really boring. And I don't like his voice. I just think that it just doesn't sound good. It has no real taste to it. It's just tasteless. I don't actually know how other people feel about him, and it's fine if you disagree with me, as I respect people's opinions. But I'm just not a fan of his music. His songs are pretty boring. What boggles me even further is the fact that the film literally just uses him as a prop instead of a character. It's really just telling at this point that this film only has these people rolled in this terrible trash fire of a movie only to cast them as only for this film to make money, and there's nothing more to it. I mean, really just look at the fact that it has Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot in the movie. It's literally just obvious that it uses celebrities as just marketing tools. Because people will just watch a movie if it just has noticeable actors that people just, see are popular and are easily marketable and noticeable. After that, we finally just get to the ending. All three of those quote unquote characters that I've discussed during this video are just working together now for some reason, even though nothing at all was ever built up to it. After they leave an airport and then the end. And the problem, with this moment in particular is not only does it just come out of nowhere, but there's no reason to even believe or buy the fact that they're just working together. It's just complete nonsense, and it just really shows how shallow and shitty this movie is from literally start to finish. Wow. What an utterly catastrophic, literally terrible trash fire of a movie. There was actually not a single redeeming quality in this entire movie. I'd rather rip my balls out and throw them on the grill and cook them than ever watch this shallow garbage again. While Evangelion 3.33 you cannot redo, and Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time are still just slightly worse than this movie altogether, that's not saying much. And I would actually argue that Red Notice, or as I really would call it, Brown Notice, or even better called Turd Notice. To be fair, I will actually say that this is the worst comedy movie that I've probably ever watched. I think it's probably even worse than Coming to America 2 and Snatch. So that is actually saying something, because I thought that those were both also awful movies. I also think it's just a little bit worse than A Silent Voice, because even though I hated A Silent Voice, I could at least understand on a surface level why a few people liked it, for the only reason of a concept that I understand in the movie, at least. I understand that the guy felt bad for the girl and he wanted to say sorry for it, but, I already nailed why I dislike that movie so much in another video where I reviewed A Silent Voice. It's just really the way that it's all presented, because it's too dramatic. But, anyways, I just think that, even though I think it's terrible, I could at least see a couple of redeeming qualities about it, which is, I think, more things redeeming about it than a movie like Red Notice. I'm not sure entirely, honestly, if it's really worse than the Star Wars sequel movies, because those are really bad, and I despise the sequels, especially The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, but it might be a little bit worse than those movies, just slightly. if anything at all. If I just had to rank this movie with everything that I've ever watched. And it might not be worse than Suicide Squad, but that's really not saying anything at all. This movie is still a complete and utter piece of shit. I feel like, I feel like Red Notice feels like kind of like a scam, really. It's got no depth, no passion, no reason for existing, literally, other than to make money and to tire out this genre of entertainment. That's why my final rating for Red Notice is as actually a 0 out of 10. If you want a much better movie than this and that does basically the same thing, and it's a comedy movie that's also with spies or a spoof movie and actually at least writes things definitely better than this, then just watch a movie like Johnny English or Ace Ventura instead of this empty, soulless garbage. The reason why this movie is everything wrong with Hollywood is because it has literally all the tropes of a terrible Hollywood movie that's corporate all bundled together into one terrible movie. It embodies literally every trope of Hollywood's commercial greed and selling points all into one movie and does it being aimed at the lowest common denominator watching things on TV. It's a generic comedy with a standard over-recycled plot with spies and tries to just be, both mixed together like, a film like Johnny English, but nowhere near as good as Johnny English. This movie didn't have any potential to be good, and it had no reason to exist. All it did was just market, popular actors. All it did was just write a very convoluted story that made no sense and was shallow. And it just had every single trope of every bad Hollywood movie that you could ever imagine. And it just has a very high budget, and they wasted literally $200 million wasting their time making nothing. Something that literally equates to literally the piss in my toilet. That's all I have to actually say about this movie. Screw this movie. Because it had no potential, and I have no reason to honestly even feel bad shitting on this movie. Because this movie is tasteless, and it has nothing redeeming about it. On literally any level. I'd like to know what you thought of this movie down below, though. I do love having discussions of everything that I talk about. Did you enjoy it and think it was, entertaining in some way? Or do you think like me and thought it had zero redeeming quality, zero redeeming value, and was just the incarnation of Hollywood's evil empire of greed all into one movie? Let me know what you think of this movie down in the comments, and I love having discussions. Thanks, guys, and have fun talking. I love my channel, I love my subscribers, and I love all my viewers, and everybody who is on my channel is always considered my friend. Thank you, guys, and have fun.